You're listening to Colorado Chamber Office Hours, a podcast that explores what matters most to business. I'm your host, Ed Sealover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. Let's get talking. Well, welcome back. We are now in the stretch run of the legislative session, which ends on May 13th. And as such, there's a lot of bills that are coming fast and furious. Today, we're going to focus on one of those new bills, House Bill 1421. And we're going to do it for two reasons. One, this is an important, if very focused bill that is a late addition to the legislative calendar. And because of that, there's some worries that it might sneak under there without getting seen by too many people, as it should. Second, this is a bill that is a collaboration between the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association. Yes, you just heard that correctly. Two organizations that often don't see eye to eye on legal issues are very much in sync on this. And to describe why today, we brought on Kyle Bachus, a noted plaintiff's attorney here in town, one of the owners of Bachus and Shanker, and also a board member of the CTLA. Kyle, thanks so much for coming on today.
Hey, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. I kind of tiptoed around exactly what 1421 does, other than to say it's a legal bill, because I want your expertise on this. What does House Bill 1421 do exactly?
Well, it tries to address a growing problem that kind of started in Arizona, believe it or not. And the problem is that Arizona was the very first state to allow non-lawyers, that's right, non-lawyers, to own and operate law firms, to direct what happens at those law firms, and to take complete financial interest in the outcome of cases in the law firms. And so Arizona is not too far away. They call this and it's an acronym that has been made up, ABS, Alternative Business Structures. They have to register and become licensed, but you don't have to be a lawyer to own a law firm in Arizona. And so as a result of that, there's been an expansion where some of these have expanded to other states by entering into referral relationships with law firms in states that require you to be a lawyer to have an ownership interest or to share in fees at a law firm. And so what they do is they might pay for the advertising through private equity interests that own this non-lawyer law firm in Arizona, pay for advertising in Colorado in exchange for getting 50% of the fees generated or something like that in a relationship, 50% of the fees on a referral basis going back to private equity in Arizona for legal work. And forever in Colorado, there's been a prohibition. You cannot own a law firm. You cannot buy a law firm. You cannot share in fees in a law firm unless you are a lawyer. And there's a lot of client-centric reasons for that. If you can think about, some people might be concerned about what's happened to the practice of medicine as corporate medicine has been taken over by non-doctors in many instances, and how that might impact legal decisions and making decisions of, no, you don't get a deposition in that case, or that case isn't going to trial because it's not in the financial interest of maybe a non-lawyer who doesn't have those client obligations. So anyway, that's what's happened. And so the bill is a bill that just clarifies, in case there's any lack of clarity, that in Colorado, you cannot own a law firm, you cannot share fees with a law firm that is owned by somebody other than lawyers.
So if that's already against the law in Colorado, why do we need the clarification? What are we seeing happen where people are, I assume, trying to sneak around the law? Well,
you hit on something, some words there that are very important. You said illegal. It's unethical right now, okay? There's a question about legality. As a lawyer, it's unethical. As a lawyer, you could be subject to discipline in the state of Colorado for fee sharing with a non-lawyer. But if you're not a lawyer to begin with, right, what's the discipline that they're going to put upon you? Nothing, right? So if you can, I think there's been this proposed kind of workaround where these ABS firms out of Arizona think that so long as the phone is answered in Arizona even if it's a Colorado matter, that somehow Colorado's professional rules don't apply. So it really is just to nip something so that it's crystal clear by passing a statute that says, yeah, it's illegal and there are going to be damage consequences, financial consequences to whether you're a non-lawyer operated or a lawyer operated. If you're engaging in conduct that has always been prohibited here, then there's going to be financial consequences. And so the bill actually calls for a couple of things. One, you can go get enjoinment to stop the action. Clients who are impacted by this kind of conduct can sue to get the fees back from the lawyers that were participating in these agreements. There's also a disgorgement provision where other affected lawyers can bring an enjoinment action and request that the court disgorge any profits that have been received from these activities. And that disgorgement's not going to go to the private actor, it's going to go to the state. So it's really a bill that I think makes a lot of practical sense. It's kind of, we're going to maintain status quo here, and we're going to make it clear that no matter what they might be doing in Arizona, which I think Arizona has a lot of regrets about these choices that they've made legislatively to allow these ABSs. That's my personal opinion. But it's going to say, they're not going to come to Colorado. And by the way, there are other states who are addressing this at the same time.
And you keep mentioning Arizona. How much are we actually seeing this in Colorado? I'm essentially wondering, is this a bill that's preventative, or is this a bill that's going after some firms that are trying to take up this business model?
There is no question that right now in Colorado, there are numerous firms that are involved in these activities that none of this existed before this legislation passed in Arizona that allowed this ABS structure to take hold. It's happening now. It's expanding. California signed legislation prohibiting fee referrals by lawyers with ABS structures in October. And it seems like, now this is just, what word on the street is. It seems like once California closed down, all eyes from Arizona started peeking east, and Colorado is on the way east. And so they have, as they were forbidden from doing this in California, they now are looking to other states, and Colorado is one that they're looking at.
And you started to touch on this, but why is this such a bad practice? What happens if we have a non-legal entity owning a law firm? What does it do to the kind of cases that firm could take up, or how they litigate them?
Well, I think it's interesting because it's I think one of the reasons that so many different entities and organizations are against this. So if we just talk about it from the Colorado lawyer perspective, the Colorado trial lawyer perspective, we as trial lawyers want to know what the rules are. Because if it's unethical for most lawyers, if it's unethical for all lawyers in Colorado to engage in this conduct, but a few are engaging in it, right, then we're not playing on an even playing field as lawyers. So I think for lawyers here, it's about clarity. What are the rules going to be? Okay. For the chamber, for instance, I don't think that the chamber is interested, and I don't think a lot of people are interested in a bunch of private equity money coming in and funding the promulgation of additional lawsuits to meet criteria that might be set up by a private equity interest that are not made up of lawyers for access to more funds, right? So if you think about it from this standpoint, is if you think that there are already frivolous lawsuits, and I think we can all say, are there frivolous lawsuits that are filed? Certainly there are frivolous lawsuits. Are there also very meritorious lawsuits that are filed? Absolutely, right? And I think that there's a concern that allowing people outside of the ethical constraints that are applicable to lawyers coming into this business structure, that you're going to see a proliferation, I think is the concern, of more frivolous lawsuits to meet maybe private equity numbers that I think raises a concern there. The insurance industry, you can imagine those concerned about insurance premiums go up. They probably don't want more lawsuits either. And I think that if our state is going to allow these ABS structures to come in, that there's a concern about those topics. And so, I think there's a difference. You talked about at the beginning. Wow, here's the Chamber of Commerce. Here's the trial lawyers. How could they? They sometimes they don't see eye to eye on legislation, but here they are, both in agreement. Well, they're in agreement, but probably for different reasons. The lawyers want to know what the rules are, and the chamber, I don't think, wants private equity coming in this setting, and I agree with that.
Now, as of the time that I contacted you, nobody had signed up in opposition to this bill yet. Do you expect pushback, and if so, from who?
Well, I think that it's such a common sense bill that is making certain that everybody understands what the rules of engagement are, and I don't think so. I think that the bar associations, I think the insurance companies, I think the hospital systems, I think the chamber, I think the trial lawyers, I think everybody wants the certainty that this bill provides. So it will be interesting, right, in the coming days to see if there are some who come up against the bill. Usually there's somebody somewhere, but I think if you look at the bill, it's a very common sense, solution oriented, and it's letting everybody know here's what the rules are so everybody knows how to play fairly in Colorado.
Well, Kyle Bachus, thank you very much for talking to us from the perspective of a noted attorney on why this bill is a good thing.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
That was great talking with Kyle Bachus. And there's honestly not a ton that I think can be added to that conversation, which is why we decided not to bring on a second guest this week. But to try to explain the business perspective a little bit better, I'm going to talk for a few minutes about why employers, insurers, and others see this issue as so important. I don't think I need to tell anyone Colorado is mired in an affordability crisis. Average home prices have crested above $560,000. Property rental prices for businesses are skyrocketing. And Colorado is either the third or fourth most expensive state when it comes to cost of living, depending on whether you're referencing U.S. News and World Report or CNBC. Well, just like regulations impact the cost of doing business, and we remain the sixth most regulated state in America, so do liability costs. And those liability costs in Colorado are rising precipitously as well, with the U.S. Chamber reporting that Coloradans face tort costs of nearly $4,200 a household as recently as 2022. And just to be clear, those numbers don't represent what a household would pay if sued. They represent how much more each household must pay in the state annually on the prices of everyday goods, on insurance policies, on healthcare, because the number of lawsuits and the size of verdicts against businesses and professionals is rising. In the view of groups like the Colorado Chamber, the addition of law firms that are run by non-attorneys will exacerbate that, because those firms will be pushing even harder for huge payouts and huge settlements that will drive up the total tort costs in the state even more. That trend has been observed in the other states where these ABS firms are permitted, and no one in the business community is eager to see that imported here. I'm not unaware that some of you by this point might be saying, wait, isn't that exactly what Kyle Bachus' firm does? And when we talked after we finished recording the conversation, I asked largely the same thing to him. Kyle told me that certainly they do go after large payouts to send messages to individuals or companies that they consider unsafe actors. But he emphasized something that we also have heard from U.S. Chamber experts who study the legal system nationally. There comes a point when you want to settle, maybe for less than you could get, because your client needs the funds or needs to move on. Law firms whose strict purpose is generating as much revenue as possible don't have the same thought process, U.S. Chamber folks have told us. In fact, they've noted instances when plaintiffs and their attorneys have moved forward on settlements only to be overruled by their funders who believe they can get more money regardless of the client's desires. That's the kind of tilted approach that the Colorado Chamber and the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association are collaborating to try to stop. So as Kyle said, it's about equity in the legal playing field for attorneys, but for business, it's about keeping down one more factor that is contributing to the state's unaffordability and making it a less attractive place for business to expand or to relocate. Thanks for listening. That's it for our interview segment. Now let's take a quick look at what you need to know about the week ahead. All right, let's look ahead at what's coming this week. But first, I'm going to throw in a little note. The committee meetings are getting less and less scheduled in advance and are coming up quicker as the session gets closer to ending here. So I may give you a couple of dates to watch for this week, but in truth, things could change a lot between the time we're recording this and the time a committee hearing is supposed to happen. So we could see a lot more action than just I'm going to tell you about. First things first, just a couple of bills that are coming up in the chambers this week in the House and in the Senate. You could see the Colorado Chamber's regulatory review effort come up for debate in the House, as well as the arbitration reform bill that we discussed a couple episodes back. In the Senate, you could see the Labor Peace Act overhaul come up. That's something we discussed way back in February. And you could also see other bills coming up, including one on surveillance pricing that would ban firms and employers from surveilling somebody's online data to figure out what to charge them or what to pay them, or in many cases, people would say what to offer them through a loyalty club program, which they argue would be banned through a bill like this. Keep track. Those could come up any day on the floor, and the Sum and Substance will be watching and reporting as they do. Now, a couple of hearing dates that we know are coming up this week. At 1:30 p.m. Monday, the House State Civic and Military Affairs Committee is going to hear Senate Bill 90. Senate Bill 90 is an adjustment to the right to repair laws that the state passed from 2022 through 2024. These were laws that allowed people to say, repair their wheelchairs, repair their farm equipment, repair consumer electronics. Well, all the states that have done this have had a clause, especially in the electronics bill, that said, except for things that could endanger national security. Those don't fit under the rules here. Our bills in the state of Colorado don't have that clause. And so backers are pushing a bill this year that would say we're going to exempt critical infrastructure from this right to repair, where anybody can be handed the diagram for how to repair such a system. That will be an interesting debate moving forward, again, scheduled for 1:30 p.m. Monday in the House State Civic and Military Affairs Committee. On Tuesday at 2 p.m., the Senate Finance Committee is going to consider a newly introduced bill, Senate Bill 178, that would seek to increase fees on the largest health insurers in this state to help fund the Health Insurance Affordability Enterprise, an enterprise that takes care of programs such as OmniSalud, which offers insurance to undocumented residents of the state, as well as helps out with adding subsidies to the policies that people buy through the state's insurance exchange. Businesses are worried that this is going to be one more cost going on to insurance fees, while backers of this bill say it is necessary to cover people who can't otherwise pay for their own insurance. On Wednesday at 1:30 p.m., well, I won't go into detail, but it's House Bill 1421, the bill we've talked about this whole episode. It goes before the House Judiciary Committee in House Committee Room 107 and is second on the agenda. And finally, Thursday afternoon at 1:30 p.m., the Senate Local Government and Housing Committee is slated once again to take up House Bill 1308. This is the bill that would allow lot splitting, allowing people who might own a home and decide they want to split their lot in half and sell the other half for a new home to do so by right in this state. This was the topic of last week's episode. That bill is going to go up in Senate Committee Room 357, and it's third on the agenda. That's all for this episode of Colorado Chamber Office Hours. Once again, I'm Ed Sealover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. I'll keep the conversation going at tsscolorado.com, and we'll see you next time as we explore the issues that matter most to business.